Welcome to Civics over Politics, Episode 11, Ireland. Thank you for joining in today's episode of Civics over Politics, recorded from the North Side neighborhood of St. Joseph, Missouri, home of the Lafayette High School Fighting Irish. Civics over Politics focuses on how the triumph of the values and practices of pluralism and reason can lead to better outcomes for all people. This is accomplished through short but substantive episodes that employ primary sources to learn more about and provide context regarding commentary on historical and current events. Today's episode, in honor of St. Patrick's Day, will focus on Ireland. We will delve into the political and social history of Ireland by exploring a few notable periods of Irish history. These include the Norman Conquest and subsequent Lordship of Ireland in 1177, the Cromwell era and its aftermath, the Rebellion of 1798 and subsequent Acts of Union, the period including the 1912 Home Rule Act through the 1919 War of Independence and Partition, and close with some interesting features about the Troubles, the Good Friday Agreement, and the present day. If anyone has feedback for the show, please shoot me an email at ericmaguire85@gmail.com or answer the listener poll on Spotify. Shares and likes on social media, as well as 5-star reviews on your podcast platform of choice, all help spread the word about the show. Where to start with a historical show about Ireland? Or you might be wondering, why? I've always been interested in Irish history, and it seems, based on seeing the partygoers down the street last Saturday night, apparently, so are many other people. Our family does have some Irish roots, as my dad's great-grandparents on his father's side immigrated to the United States from County Cork and purchased a farm in Wisconsin in the mid-1800s, which our family still owns to this day. I've always found it notable that most people do not tend to refer to their Irish ancestry as British. Perhaps this episode will help to explain why that is, even when technically British is an accurate label. I don't, and you probably do not, want this podcast to last for several hours. So I'm going to pick a few eras and situations in Irish history that I believe are foundational to the story. We'll begin with a controversial document, allegedly written by the only English pope to ever live, Adrian IV, to King Henry II of England, that claimed to give Henry permission to enter and rule Ireland on behalf of the Church. The provenance of and legitimacy of this letter is highly contested. It is likely not entirely legit. However, that has not stopped it from being used as an excuse over the centuries. This is some serious politicking under the guise of religion. Here's from the letter. Thou hast signified to us, indeed, most beloved Son in Christ, that thou dost desire to enter into the island of Ireland, in order to subject the people to the laws and to extirpate the vices that have there taken root, and that thou art willing to pay an annual pension to St. Peter of 1 penny from every house, and to preserve the rights of the churches in that land inviolate and entire. We therefore, seconding with the favor it deserves, thy pious and laudable desire, in granting a benignant assent to thy petition, are well pleased that, for the enlargement of the bounds of the Church, for the restraint of vice, for the correction of morals and the introduction of virtues, for the advancement of the Christian religion, thou shouldest enter the island, and carry out there the things that look to the honor of God and to its own salvation. And may the people of that land receive thee with honor, and venerate thee as their master, provided always that the rights of the churches remain inviolate and entire, and, saving to St. Peter and the Holy Roman Church the annual pension of 1 penny from each house, if therefore thou dost see fit to complete what thou hast conceived in thy mind, strive to imbue that people with good morals, and bring it to pass as well though thyself and through these whom thou dost know from their faith, doctrine, and of course life to be fit for such work, and that the church may there be adorned, the Christian religion planted and made to grow, and the things which pertain to the honor of God and to salvation be so ordered that thou mayest merit to obtain an abundant and lasting reward from God, and on earth a name glorious throughout the ages. Well, thanks for bearing with me on that, but I thought it was interesting to share. Shortly after this exchange allegedly took place, King Henry II created a Lordship of Ireland and divided power among his chosen designees. This involved not only grants of political power, but also of land and resources. Soon to follow was the English language and the English common law, as well as the creation of county boundaries throughout Ireland. Be sure to check out the show notes for some sources and links about a lot of this historical information that's being shared. Later on, the Protestant Reformation caused yet further waves in Ireland, as Henry VIII made sure that the official British religion would no longer be Catholic. Back in these times, religion was not merely left to the private choice of a family or an individual, or even a village, county, or province. Pluralism wasn't really a thing. Oliver Cromwell became the Lord Protector of the Commonwealth of England, Scotland, and Ireland in 1653, shortly after the end of the Civil War, in which he was a celebrated general who had conquered Ireland. Cromwell would die in 1659, and after his death, he was posthumously tried for treason and executed. Even though he was already dead, his severed head was displayed for over 20 years on a pike outside of Westminster Hall. Gruesome. During Cromwell's Irish campaign, he engaged in a reign of terror and religious and ethnic cleansing on a large scale, killing thousands of Catholics and giving no quarter to most of the rebels who opposed British or Anglican rule. There were also decrees of massive land confiscation and forced resettlement, as well as massive immigration from England into Northern Ireland. Although, after Cromwell died, the letter of the law regarding all of that was not always followed to its fullest or worst extent. After a bloody but failed rebellion in 1798, there was a push for further unification of Ireland within Britain, and the Acts of Union were passed in 1800. This codified, officially, legal rights for Irish as citizens of the United Kingdom and gave representation in the House of Commons and some in the House of Lords, and in fact created the United Kingdom. The reality in Ireland in 1800 was that Catholics had already been mostly dispossessed of land and legal rights for centuries by this point, and the backlash to rebellions left a further divided Ireland. The newly formed legal situation did provide a spark to new approaches for Catholics to strive towards gaining political rights, which came to a head in 1914 in light of the events of World War I, with the Home Rule crisis. The Protestant Unionists in the North joined the Ulster Volunteer Force, which was an armed militia formed to ensure that the North would stay part of the United Kingdom. There were very large numbers that joined the UVF, or up to 200,000 volunteers, potentially. Even larger numbers of Catholics throughout the Ireland joined the Irish Republican Army. Here is what Winston Churchill, who was a member of Parliament at the time, had to say about the situation. He takes a bit after his father. Here's what Winston said. "Bloodshed, gentlemen, no doubt is lamentable. I have seen some of it. More perhaps than many of those who talk about it with such levity. But there are worse things than bloodshed, even on the extreme scale. An eclipse of the central government of the British Empire would be worse. The abandonment by our public men of the righteous aims to which they are pledged in honor would be worse. The cowardly abdication of responsibility by the executive would be worse. The trampling down of law and order, which under the conditions of a civilized state assure life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, all this would be worse than bloodshed." Well, factional violence did ensue, and after a failed Easter uprising in 1916, a civil war broke out in 1919 that killed a few thousand people, and the result was the creation of the Irish Free State and the Partition of Ireland in 1922. This result may have been the only politically and practically feasible option at the time. I don't know for sure, but it did leave the island divided. And 35% of the population of the 6 counties of Ulster, that's the north, that stayed with the UK remained Catholic. Although the Catholic population in Belfast, Derry, and the surrounding areas was legally not subject to apartheid by the letter of the law, the situation in some ways mirrored the Jim Crow South, with housing policy affecting voting patterns and also voting rights themselves, and employment prospects with businesses and government being affected by birthright and religion. Many Catholics were prevented from joining the police department, and the military, and other businesses. This was definitely not a pluralistic society. A civil rights movement began. It may be hard to pinpoint exactly when what is termed the Troubles began, but many say it was in October of 1968 when a peaceful civil rights march against the housing policy in Derry was violently attacked by police of the Royal Ulster Constabulary. This event radicalized many, and the provisional IRA would soon grow into a paramilitary organization. Events reached a boiling point with the Bloody Sunday, which was January 30th, 1972, in the killing of 13 civilians by British Army paratroopers during a civil rights march. 21 soldiers fired 108 live rounds into the crowd. All eyewitness accounts say that crowd was unarmed. Here's a little bit of audio from that day, Bloody Sunday.
And disillusion, of sudden hopes and equally sudden disappointments. It began badly. On the last Sunday in January, Catholic civil rights marchers defied a government ban on parades and came into violent conflict with British troops in the center of Londonderry. The rioting became so bad that paratroops were finally sent through the barricades to restore order. Shooting began, and within half an hour, 13 civilians, all of them Catholics, were shot dead by British troops. The troops claimed they'd shot back in self-defense at snipers who'd started the shooting, and a judicial inquiry later cleared them of the charge that they'd fired indiscriminately into a fleeing crowd.
I find it really interesting that the documentary and newsreels at the time covered this from a heavily English perspective. You wonder how that shaped the narrative throughout the United Kingdom. Another tragic day in the Troubles was Bloody Friday, which was Friday, July 21st, 1972, in which the Irish Republican Army exploded 22 bombs in the course of 75 minutes, killing 9 people and seriously injuring 130 others. In reaction to Bloody Friday, the British government proceeded to enter several of what were previously considered no-go zones and implemented harsh crackdown measures. Accountability on both sides, up until this day, for the excesses remains elusive. Here's some audio from the Bloody Friday bombings.
The timers came from parking meters in America. They'd been posted to a safe house in West Belfast and divided between bomb factories in the markets, New Lodge in North Belfast, and West Belfast. The engineers started to assemble the bombs, adding timers and detonators to packages of nitrobenzene. They were now ready to be driven to their targets.
You can tell this conflict spread not only to the rest of the United Kingdom, but involved worldwide entities, including the United States and people in the United States. The Troubles officially came to an end with the 1998 Good Friday Agreement. This agreement was voted on by the citizens of both the North and the South, and involved codifying how political representation would work going forward, and also codified human rights provisions to strive towards avoiding future discriminatory practices. While there has been some violence and issues since then, it has not been on the scale seen previously. At some point, who knows, maybe there will be a referendum on a united Ireland, and maybe it will pass. Here's an excerpt from the Good Friday Agreement that captures its spirit. We reaffirm our total and absolute commitment to exclusively democratic and peaceful means of resolving differences on political issues, and our opposition to any use or threat of force by others for any political purpose. What lessons can we learn as Americans about this Irish experience? Are there ways that we can do better to live among our neighbors who may believe differently than we do? Thank you for listening to today's episode. I hope you found it enjoyable and informative. Our next show will be a special treat, a wide-ranging interview with my stepson Jackson about all kinds of interesting topics. He and I have been known to have some spirited conversations from time to time, and this will be a good one. If you have any feedback for the show, please leave a comment or answer the listener poll regarding your thoughts on Ireland. It's been fun reviewing the history of Ireland, and I cannot wait to share the episode with Jackson with everyone. Until next time.